The Pat Kenny Show
with Energia, Ireland's business energy provider.
Newstalk 106 to 108.
Well, next, the story of a man who had it all, a chain of businesses employing over 200 people nationwide, a successful politician and a gilded broadcasting career. But it all came crashing down as liquidators were appointed to his business, and a very public dispute with AIB drove him to leave this country and be declared a bankrupt in Wales. But now he's back in Ireland, not 12 years later, not 3 years later, but 1 year on, and he is debt-free. Ivan Yates, good morning and welcome back.
Good morning, Pat, and good luck with the new show.
Thank you very much. Now, we'll be talking about why you went to the UK in a moment, but first, what went wrong with a business that appeared on the face of it to be very successful?
Well, Celtic Bookmakers, through my decisions, made a strategic error of doubling its size in 2006. I'd set it up in 87 and I built it up to 63 shops. I did it by acquisition. I paid too much for the businesses. I didn't have an internet business, and basically when disposable income went down, betting went down, and it started to incur losses.
Were you simply greedy? Is that how you describe it?
I was actually trying to consolidate the business because I felt I had to build it up to an indestructible size of 200 million turnover. It was making 4 million a year, 80,000 a week, and maybe I thought it was indestructible. I bought Malloy's Bookmakers, UBet Bookmakers, and in 2010, when we hit the skids, I signed a personal guarantee which made the difficulties go way beyond Celtic Bookmakers.
Paddy Power, Boyle Sports, Ladbrokes, the likes of those, they all survived this depletion in disposable income. Why did Celtic suffer disproportionately?
They had deeper pockets. They had an internet strategy which internationalised them, and there was a big shift away from over-the-counter betting towards the internet, a combination of all those factors.
You ended up owing the banks millions. Now, was that property related? Did you buy real estate as well as the businesses?
All our shops were leasehold. There was no property play. I did take out a personal loan of 700,000 to buy an adjoining house to the farm, and I repaid that in full. I actually used all my money from Newstalk, all my savings, to repay over 800,000 up to 2011 on that.
OK, I'm perplexed though, because a business like this, employing 200 people with multiple branches all around the place, one would expect that to be a limited liability company with the protection of limited liability. Why did you not enjoy that protection?
The company did, and I did. The company went into liquidation and it availed of that. But my difficulty was the residual debt owing to the bank, when all the shops were sold and we cooperated fully, was subject to a default mechanism whereby Deirdre and I had signed a personal guarantee. So they said, once the liquidation occurred, this is your debt, Ivan. It's as if you had built a house or bought something yourself.
Now, when you signed those personal guarantees, and many people did during the boom time, did you know what you were signing? I mean, did the bank explain to you what the consequences, that your house, your home, your farm, that everything would be on the line in the event?
I was utterly naive and foolish about that. I knew I had given a secured charge, fixed and floating charge on the business on 80 acres of land. But when I took legal advice, trying to negotiate with the bank, I was faced with a bizarre situation. I was told not only would all assets be gone, my home and everything, but all future earnings for 10 years would be gone.
You know, you can say that you were naive, that you didn't understand, but you were an experienced bookmaker. You were a former cabinet minister.
Oh, it's my responsibility.
What I'm saying is the bank, and you have in a forthcoming book a chapter on the banks, which we'll come to in a moment, but they have every right to expect that someone like you, being as experienced as you were, would not walk into something like this with your eyes closed. Whatever about Deirdre.
Well, and I want to be clear about this. After the liquidation, I did everything in my power, and I had a senior debt negotiator with me to put forward two offers to the bank, one in 2011 and one before I left. And basically what I said is, look, if I could keep the house, I'll sell every other bit of property, and along with what I've already paid and what I'm prepared to give you as a percentage of my earnings, and this was all in writing, I will give you over 80 cents in the euro. They turned around and said to me at meetings I will never forget, Ivan, if you gave us 99 cents in the euro, we wouldn't accept it. When I said, well, what if I die? They looked at each other and they said, we reserve our position beyond the grave. I really, and this, if I could make one point in this interview, and I've read all about myself and how smart I was and savvy going to the UK, I never wanted to go bankrupt in England or anywhere else. The fateful lowest point for me was when they tried to bankrupt me in the High Court. My barrister rang me on Friday the 27th of July and said, Ivan, get real. Even if we win the case on a dispute about interest, you have to face the inevitability that if AIB will go back into court, get a judgment, reduce the amount they're going after you, you are going to be bankrupt. And your only choice is which jurisdiction you're going to operate in.
So bankruptcy was inevitable.
By virtue of their court proceedings. And can I make one point? I was absolutely shocked to find AIB have 1.3 million customers, maybe 20,000 underwater. A Dáil question was tabled last November. How many people have they taken bankruptcy proceedings against in Ireland? And the answer?
What's the answer?
2 persons, Ivan and Deirdre Yates.
That's it.
That's it.
Why do you think the bank went after you? Were you to be the poster boy for bad debts, that if they can get Ivan Yates, a bit like Lester Piggott and the Internal Revenue Service in Britain, if you can get Lester Piggott, you can get anybody. So let's get Ivan Yates. Do you believe that is the case?
I honestly don't know. They said to me when I was negotiating, we have no authorisation for any debt settlement. No authorisation from our shareholder, from our board. And I felt there was huge indecision on one hand. And secondly, I suppose they didn't want to create a precedent of settling for 85 cents in the euro with me, because maybe that could be used as a template for other debts.
At the same time, we know that when
can I also say, I think they will get, I believe, in terms of the taxpayer, they will get €1 million less going the route they went in terms of bankruptcy than they would have got.
It may be that they have to, because you're such a high-profile figure, and after all, you owe the money to a taxpayer-owned bank, that on behalf of the taxpayer, they have to make every effort, 100%, 1,000% effort to get as much as they can out of you, particularly as a former politician.
What I'm saying is, they would have got 1 million more, maybe more, in my estimation, if they had gone the negotiated route. And my advisor said to them that he had seen other insolvency cases, and these aren't good for the bank. I mean, they have hired 3 top lawyer firms. I am now, can I just explain bankruptcy? The deal is, the day you are made bankrupt, you lose everything. I've lost my home, I've lost my property. They actually took the money that was in my flat. And the deal is, on your discharge, you don't owe anybody. But I face huge difficulties, restrictions in Swansea. They're still pursuing my wife. My mother's farm payments, the farm is rented out, they're pursuing that. And I have huge legal bills myself to face, and I'm on the bottom rung of the property ladder.
What do you think will happen to Deirdre, your wife? I mean, she signed these guarantees with you. She has not been made a bankrupt in Wales or indeed anywhere else.
She
what's
also
the future for her?
She faces. She's a primary school teacher. She faces enormous difficulties. They've threatened her with a judgment of 3.4 million. I will try and negotiate her that. I just don't know.
It was speculated at the time that you were selling Celtic Bookmakers. How close did you come to getting a deal that would have avoided all of these problems, and that you would have had, not alone would you be secure, you'd have change?
Well, I deal with this in the book. In the first week of October 2008, I was in William Hill's boardroom, and my plan was to sell the business for 13 million. The next day, the betting tax went up, an emergency budget from 1% to 2%. It's paid by the bookie, not by the punter. There was an expectation that the roulette machines, fixed odds betting terminals, would be brought in. The government decided against that. And from that moment on, I was on the slippery slope of cutting costs, the stress of trying to save 340 jobs, all the difficulties of that. And
but you were that close to
Well, put it like this.
Weeks away from a deal?
Well, put it like this. I thought the negotiations were going to go well. I was actually happy to be paid in William Hill shares. They had 50 shops in Ireland, but they ended up pulling out of Ireland, so the whole thing went west.
You're writing a book, as I mentioned. The chapter on the banks you've called AIB, which stands for Arrogant, Inhuman Bastards, which is a pun on a movie. Your experience of them, I mean, you clearly despise them.
Well, they've destroyed my life. I mean,
you destroyed your life.
Oh, sorry, I take responsibility for it, but it was their choice to force me into bankruptcy. I feel, personally, inside this suit, a deep sense of shame. What I've dragged my 81-year-old mother through, what I've dragged my wife and family through. I mean, bankruptcy is an indelible stain and stigma on my CV, because I'd be introduced, doing programs like this, former minister, former bookie, former broadcaster, now former bankrupt. I really wanted to do anything to get out of that, and they compelled me into that, and I will find it hard to forgive them for that.
You relay conversations with a particular individual who used to work with Anglo, and thinking that he was in conversation with you at the height of your difficulties, and he's saying to you, people should have more sympathy for Anglo and what it achieved and so on. Meantime, they're screwing you to the wall. Do you think there are double standards at work here?
I do. I've lots of views about the law on personal guarantees, about how the UK insolvency system works, and it's not working in Ireland 5 years later. I have lots of views about corporate insolvency versus personal insolvency. But you know what? I've lots of time to deal with those public policy issues.
No, but you're scathing on the part of banks who are coming after people like you. You very publicly.
All I can say is I so empathise with the waves of uncertainty, the harassment. You have no idea the sleepless nights and just how awful it is to be on the receiving end of this. And it is a David and Goliath situation.
But you talk about them massaging the politicians and the mandarins and effectively lying to them to cajole a guarantee out of the state. And you're saying that they were more broke really than you were.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in my view, the Anglo tapes revealed that the banks systematically minimised their losses in the presentation of the government to get small incremental amounts of capital, whereas if they said we're in a hole for 30 billion here, the state would have had a real choice. So I do believe, and maybe that's going on in terms of mortgage losses and so on, but all that is for another day. What I want to say to people is this, that I could not have gone through what I went through without my pension, and I'm deeply appreciative of that. It's about $3,000 a month. I have a self-awareness. Nobody died. I have a lot to be thankful for, and I just want to make a fresh start with my life.
But if you look back to the banks and the way they may have cajoled and persuaded and even misled the mandarins and the politicians, you really have to say, well, the state should have been better at doing its job. It should have had the information to face down the mandarins and the bankers as they attempted to win their guarantee.
I have all sorts of views about the nationalisation of the banks. I believe the state was duped by bankers in bankers' interests. I believe that all public policy is about protecting the banks, and I believe it's misguided. But Pat, to be honest with you, I've come back from a harrowing 16 months of desolation, isolation, self-inflicted. My comfort was in the bottom of a glass. I had no one to speak to over there. I had no friends. I'd Skype Deirdre every night, and I just want to restart my life. There's time for all those public policy issues later.
Life in Wales, I mean, you said the great joy of it, and it was the only joy, was anonymity, that people didn't know who Ivan Yates was.
Yes, you'd know all about that.
But the question of drinking, gambling, loneliness, all of that, people will say, well, you ran away to there. You could have faced the music and faced 12 years of bankruptcy here, or ultimately, if it was delayed enough, 3 years of bankruptcy here.
I believe the Irish insolvency system was dysfunctional, was draconian. The case officer I dealt with, the guy who took my cash out of my flat, he said, Ivan, I want to tell you, the British system is based on difficult things happen to people. We believe in making an economic contribution to those human beings and getting them going again. I just wish the Irish insolvency system had the same attitude.
When people say you took the card's way out, you fled, you went over there, you got out of the way, leaving others behind who had to live with, if you like, the ignominy, what do you say to those people?
I say that I'm Irish, I'll be buried in Enniscorthy. There's never any doubt about that. EU law provides anyone with the opportunity I availed of to go and have your comey. I went through 4 or 5 court processes, and I have found no wrongdoing, no moving around of assets, full tax compliance. As a director of Celtic, there's no issue with the director of corporate enforcement. I believe I have fully complied with all laws, and I'm just looking for a second chance.
I'll read you some of the texts coming in, and you're familiar with this process. Yeah. Would Ivan advise other people to do the same and go bankrupt in the UK if their banks won't accept their situation? That's from Simon in Donnybrook.
I would be very slow to advise anyone to do it. On 2 occasions I was so down I wish I was dead. So if someone went and committed suicide, how would I feel?
Any of the money from the Newstalk wage or future books going to the taxpayer since he owes us? That's another one. I'll read a number along this line. As a taxpayer in negative equity with no future for myself and my kids, I would like to congratulate Ivan Yates on playing the system perfectly, as he still gets his ministerial pension paid for by the taxpayer and continues to play us all for fools. He's an absolute disgrace. That's from John. Ask him if he retains his TD's pension while owing money to others. That's from Anne. This man ran off to the UK to avoid repaying 4 million plus of debts. He thinks by spending a year relaxing in Wales that he can just swan back and resume business as usual. I find the behaviour unacceptable, and so on.
Well, all I can say to that is I've lost everything. I've lost my home. I've lost all I worked over my lifetime for. And the deal in bankruptcy anywhere in the world is you are allowed a fresh start. And from that point of view, I will do my best to try and procure a home for my family. And I am, as I say, in a position where I was compelled into bankruptcy. This was not something I chose.
Final question. You will be resuming work on this station, on the breakfast show. Do you think you'll be credible as an interviewer of bankers when they come on?
Well, I think I have an insight into what they do to their victims. Which
Can you be fair to them, do you think?
It's a great thing about Newstalk. You know what? The listener's got to make up their own mind. I do carry baggage. I always carry political baggage and all sorts of baggage. And it's part of the national conversation. I'm not right about everything, but I just hope on Newstalk I can stimulate and add to that. And I love the discerning listeners who text in and whack me off.
All right. Well, Ivan Yates, thank you very much for joining us.
And good luck.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Energia. Energy that means business.